Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of HR Game Changers. We're diving into the future of branding today. More specifically, what it really takes to successfully rebrand as we head into 2025. And to help me unpack some of the research we have lined up is HR expert Louisa.
Well, it's great to be here. I think most of us, when we hear rebranding, we think, like a new logo or maybe a tagline gets a little refresh. But the research that we're looking at today from WUM suggests that in 2025, rebranding is going to be so much more than just like a surface level makeover.
So not just a fresh coat of paint then. What's making this so different in 2025?
Yeah, it's multidimensional now. So the research is suggesting that instead of just refreshing a company's image, rebranding in 2025 is going to need to be this complete transformation. Like it has to reflect the company's values and really show how it's adapting to, the demands of an ever-changing marketplace.
Sounds like companies are going to have to think a lot bigger and bolder. Where do they even begin with something like that?
Yeah. Well, one of the things that came up in the research is the importance of internal culture. The Harvard Business Review was talking about how crucial it is that employees really become brand champions. So they need to live and breathe the brand before it's ever even presented to the outside world.
That makes sense. I mean, you can't expect customers to buy into a rebrand if your own people aren't fully on board, right?
Yeah.
What else is going to be really crucial for a successful rebrand going forward?
Well, technology, of course, is a huge factor, and AI particularly. When you think about how hyper-connected consumers are these days, everybody expects brands to be so agile. And McKinsey's research was really emphasizing how rebranding now has to include things like digital-first approaches and those really interactive experiences.
So no more static websites or brochures, I guess. It sounds like we're talking about fully interactive and personalized experiences now. How are companies going to keep up with demands like that?
Data analytics is going to be so essential. Deloitte was pointing out that rebranding in 2025 is going to really heavily depend on data analysis. And not just to craft those brand narratives, but to be able to adapt messaging in real time, staying ahead of the curve and being able to respond to trends as they emerge. That's going to be critical.
Yeah, I can see how that would be incredibly valuable. But what about AI? Where does that fit into the picture?
Well, AI and machine learning, they can be used to analyze market trends and actually predict shifts before they even happen. Accenture's research was suggesting that some companies are even using AI to identify new opportunities before their competitors even know that they exist.
That's incredible. It's almost like having a crystal ball to see into the future of your brand. But even with all of this amazing technology, there's still going to be more to rebranding than just data and algorithms, right?
You're absolutely right. Branding Mag and HubSpot, they both really emphasize that even with all of these advances in technology, rebranding still needs to be very deeply rooted in customer centricity.
So really understanding your customer is still at the heart of branding, even in this high-tech future we're talking about.
Absolutely. Companies have to understand what their customers value and make sure that those values are reflected in every single interaction they have. In fact, HubSpot was suggesting that ongoing consumer research should just become standard practice. It's really the only way to keep a pulse on those changing sentiments and preferences.
Yeah, what are the risks if companies fail to prioritize that customer centricity?
Well, they risk losing touch with their customer base and alienating them. And I think this is especially important now in the age of social media. A single misstep can be amplified and shared so quickly. Imagine the damage a tone-deaf rebrand could do.
Yeah, it sounds like a PR nightmare waiting to happen. But on the flip side, though, getting this right, that could have a massive positive impact.
It absolutely could. A rebrand that really resonates with your audience, that includes, your current customers and potential customers, that can generate so much loyalty. You get that positive word of mouth and ultimately a stronger position in the market.
It's all about building those genuine connections right. And one thing that's become increasingly important for establishing those connections is sustainability. How does that play into rebranding in 2025?
Well, sustainability is no longer just a trend. It's an expectation now. The research from Interbrand was indicating that consumers are increasingly choosing brands that really align with their own values. And for a lot of people, sustainability is one of those core values.
The companies can't just slap a green label on their products anymore. They really have to demonstrate a genuine commitment to environmental and social responsibility.
Exactly. It needs to be part of a company's DNA. Research from Business Insider actually shows that this is especially important for younger demographics. They're so passionate about things like climate change and social justice.
They are the consumers of tomorrow, right? And their expectations are different. It makes sense that companies need to pay attention to what they care about. What happens if those priorities are ignored?
Well, they risk coming across as out of touch or superficial or even hypocritical. And in 2025, consumers are going to see right through that.
Authenticity is key. And speaking of authenticity, another essential aspect of rebranding these days is diversity and inclusion.
Absolutely. Bloomberg was highlighting how diverse representation can be such a powerful differentiator in the marketplace. And I mean diversity across the board. Visuals, messaging, leadership, it can't just be surface level.
Right, so it's not enough to just show diversity in your marketing materials. It's about having a truly inclusive culture at every level of the company.
Precisely. And the research from Marketing Week was really underscoring how inclusive language and imagery that can really broaden brands' appeal and foster that goodwill. It demonstrates that you're not just targeting one specific demographic, but that you actually value and respect a diverse range of perspectives and experiences.
So what are the consequences for brands that miss the mark on diversity and inclusion?
Well, the experts in Ad Age were warning that if brands don't address these issues authentically, they really risk losing the trust of consumers. These days, consumers are savvy. They're quick to call out empty gestures or tokenism.
So it's not enough to just talk about diversity and inclusion. You need to demonstrate a real commitment. How can companies actually do that?
Well, true inclusivity means taking concrete actions. Partnering with minority-owned businesses, launching community engagement initiatives, and creating a workplace where everyone feels valued and respected. It's really about creating a culture of belonging.
We've covered so much ground already. The multidimensional nature of rebranding, the role of technology and AI, the importance of customer centricity, sustainability, diversity, and inclusion. But timing and execution have to be key elements as well, right?
Absolutely. Inc. magazine was really stressing that rushing the rebranding process without proper market testing, that can be disastrous. They were advocating for pilots and feedback loops with key stakeholders, and a willingness to adapt the rollout strategy as needed.
So it sounds like rebranding is a very iterative process now.
It really is. And brand finance was adding that companies really need to carefully consider their brand architecture, especially if they have multiple sub-brands or product lines.
I'm not sure I fully understand what you mean by brand architecture.
So think of it as the framework that organizes all of the different brands and sub-brands within a company. So for instance, if a company is launching a new line of products, maybe it's aimed at a different demographic, they need to consider how that new brand is going to fit within that existing brand structure. Does it complement the main brand? Does it appeal to the same customer base? You don't want to create confusion or dilute your brand equity.
Okay, yeah, that's really helpful. So how does brand architecture factor into rebranding then?
Well, it's all about consistency and ensuring a unified identity across all of your brands. It's about aligning your style, guides your messaging, and the overall customer experience. So think about it this way. When you see the Apple logo on a product, you know exactly what to expect in terms of quality and design. Whether it's an iPhone, a MacBook, or even a pair of headphones, it all fits under that single cohesive vision.
Yeah, that's a great example. So it's about creating this clear, consistent brand experience that really reinforces your core values and resonates with your audience.
Exactly. Everything comes down to building that brand equity. A brand that's clear, consistent, instantly recognizable. That becomes much more valuable. Think about brands like Nike or Coca-Cola. You can recognize them instantly anywhere in the world.
Yeah, that's the kind of brand recognition that companies dream of.
It is. But it doesn't happen overnight. It takes strategic planning, consistent effort, and a deep understanding of your target audience.
We've talked about a lot of these big picture elements of rebranding, but how can companies actually put these ideas into practice? Are there some specific steps they can take?
Absolutely. One really practical step is to conduct regular brand audits. But I don't mean just a surface level check. I mean a deep dive into the company's culture, their operations, their technology adoption, their sustainability practices.
So it's about identifying any gaps between what a brand says it stands for and what it actually does.
Exactly. Another crucial step is investing in that employee journey. So providing training workshops, open forums, to make sure that everyone in the company understands and embodies that new brand messaging.
As you said earlier, employees need to be the brand's biggest champions.
They really do. After all, if your own team doesn't believe in the brand, it's going to be very difficult to convince anyone else.
This has been so insightful. But given that we're talking about, future-proofing brands, are there other things that companies can do to really stay ahead of the curve?
Well, one thing that's becoming increasingly important is experimentation. So rather than launching this massive rebrand all at once, companies can start with smaller, beta launches, or pilot campaigns.
So kind of dip their toe in the water before taking the full plunge.
Exactly. This allows them to try out new website layouts, maybe some messaging on social media, even an AI-powered chatbot, without putting their entire brand reputation at risk.
And these experiments provide valuable feedback.
They do. They show you what resonates with your audience and what falls flat, so you can adjust your strategy accordingly.
This sounds very data-driven.
It is. And speaking of data, it's critical to measure your progress using those key performance indicators, those KPIs. Things like brand recall, social media engagement, or even sentiment analysis.
So it's not enough to just launch a rebrand and hope for the best. You need to be tracking how it's performing and making adjustments along the way.
You need to be able to pivot if something isn't working or if you spot a new opportunity. It all comes back to that agility we were talking about earlier.
This has been a fascinating look at the future of rebranding. 2025 is shaping up to be a real game changer for companies that want to revamp their image and connect with their audiences in these new and innovative ways.
It is. Rebranding in 2025 is all about authenticity, purpose, and dynamism. It's about leveraging technology and data, but never losing sight of that human element.
It's a lot to take in, but it's exciting.
It will be fascinating to see how companies adapt to these changes and what innovative approaches they come up with.
This is just part one of our deep dive into the future of rebranding in 2025. We'll continue our exploration in part two, where we'll take an even deeper look at the practical steps companies can take to create those truly transformative brand experiences. Stay tuned. Welcome back to HR Game Changers. We're going to continue exploring those rebranding strategies for 2025. But now we're going to dig a little bit deeper into some of the practical steps that can really make these concepts a reality. Yeah, we've talked about those big ideas, but now I'm curious. How do companies actually implement these changes? What are the concrete steps they can take?
Well, we touched on conducting brand audits and, investing in employee training, and those are definitely essential. But one key aspect we haven't really fully explored yet is defining a clear brand purpose. And this is really the foundation for everything else.
So you're talking about going beyond just what a company sells and really articulating why they do what they do.
Precisely. It's about identifying and expressing the company's core values, its mission. The positive impact it wants to have on the world. And this purpose, it should resonate not only with customers, but with employees, investors, the community as a whole.
I can see how a strong brand purpose can really act as a compass for all of the other decisions in a rebrand.
That's a great way to put it. And this purpose needs to be reflected in everything, from the company's products and services to its marketing messages, even its internal culture.
So it's not just coming up with a catchy slogan. It's about living and breathing those values every single day.
Exactly. And that's where employee engagement becomes so critical. If employees really feel connected to that company's purpose and they believe in what the brand stands for, they become these authentic advocates.
A truly successful rebrand needs to be a company-wide effort then.
It absolutely does. Everyone needs to be on board, aligned with this new direction. And that often requires a real shift in mindset and culture.
So it's not just about updating the visuals and messaging, but actually changing how people think and act within the organization.
You hit the nail on the head. It's about fostering a culture that embraces innovation, collaboration, and that customer-centric approach. It's about empowering employees to be brand ambassadors and equipping them with the tools and the training they need.
That can be quite a challenge, I imagine, especially for those larger, more established organizations.
It can be, but it's essential. And this is where strong leadership is so crucial. Leaders need to be visible champions of that rebrand, communicating the vision clearly, inspiring buy-in, and modeling the desired behaviors.
So it's a top-down and a bottom-up approach.
I like that. You need both. You need strong leadership guiding the way and engaged employees actively participating to make that rebrand truly transformative.
Are there specific tools or strategies that companies can use to really facilitate that kind of cultural shift?
There are. We talked about training and workshops, but companies can also utilize things like storytelling and internal communications to help employees connect with that new brand narrative.
What do you mean by storytelling in this context?
Well, it's about sharing real-life examples of how the rebrand is actually impacting customers, employees, and the community. It's about showcasing those positive changes that are happening and celebrating the successes along the way.
So it's a way to make the rebrand feel more tangible and relatable for those employees.
Exactly. This can be done through internal newsletters, videos, podcasts, even town hall meetings. The key is to make it engaging and authentic. so employees feel like they're part of something meaningful.
It sounds like clear and consistent communication is key throughout this whole process.
Absolutely. Transparency builds trust and buy-in. It's important to communicate not only what is changing, but why, and what it means for everyone involved.
Okay, so we've talked a lot about these internal aspects of rebranding. Let's talk about that external piece.
Yeah.
What are some best practices for actually launching a rebrand to the public?
Well, this is where all that hard work and preparation pays off. A successful launch. It should be strategic, well-timed, and carefully executed.
So what are some of the things that companies should really keep in mind during that launch phase?
Well, the most important thing is making sure the messaging is clear and consistent, and that it really resonates with their target audience. I know we've discussed this quite a bit, but it's crucial.
What else?
Well, they need to leverage a variety of channels to reach their audience. This could include social media, email, marketing, public relations, advertising events, even partnerships with influencers.
It's about creating a multifaceted campaign that really reaches people where they are.
Exactly. And it's also about creating that excitement and anticipation leading up to the launch.
Okay, so how do you do that effectively?
Well, think teasers, behind-the-scenes glimpses, those interactive campaigns. Get people talking, generate some buzz. You want to create a sense of momentum and anticipation that builds towards that big reveal.
A well-executed launch can really set the tone for the entire rebranding journey then.
It absolutely can. It's a chance to make that strong first impression and really introduce the world to the brand's new personality and direction.
This all sounds fantastic in theory, but I'm sure there are challenges and potential pitfalls along the way. What are some of the biggest hurdles that companies face during a rebrand, and how can they overcome them?
That's a great question. One common challenge is resistance to change. People are creatures of habit, and those major shifts can be met with skepticism or even pushback.
Especially if people feel like the old brand was working just fine.
Exactly. That's why communication is so crucial. Companies need to clearly articulate the reasons for the rebrand and the benefits it will bring, address those concerns directly, and be transparent about the process.
So it's about bringing people along on that journey and
Yeah.
helping them understand that why behind the change.
Yes. And it's about creating a sense of ownership. When people feel like they're part of the process, they're much more likely to embrace that new brand.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
What other challenges come to mind?
Another hurdle is managing expectations. A rebrand isn't a magic solution. It won't solve all of a company's problems overnight.
So be realistic about what a rebrand can actually achieve.
Exactly. It's about setting those clear goals, establishing metrics, and tracking progress. Remember, it's an ongoing process, not a one-time event.
Patience is key.
It is. And flexibility and adaptability. The market is constantly changing, and companies need to be willing to adjust their strategies as needed.
So have a plan, but be open to making changes.
A successful rebrand requires strategic planning, creative thinking, and a willingness to adapt to that ever-evolving landscape.
Okay, so we've talked about overcoming challenges, but what about seizing opportunities? How can companies leverage a rebrand to really gain a competitive advantage?
Another great question. A rebrand can be such a powerful tool for differentiation, especially in a crowded market. It's a chance to really highlight what makes a company unique and tell its story in a fresh and compelling way.
So it's about finding that special something that really sets you apart from the competition.
It is, and it's about communicating that unique value proposition to your target audience in a way that really resonates with them.
What strategies can help companies achieve that?
Well, one approach is to focus on emotional storytelling. So instead of just listing features and benefits, companies can use stories to connect with customers on a deeper level.
It's about appealing to the heart as well as the head.
Exactly. It's also about showcasing the company's personality and values. In a world where consumers are seeking authenticity, brands need to be genuine and relatable.
Let your true colors shine through.
I love that. Don't be afraid to show your personality and let people know what you stand for. That's what makes you memorable and connects you with the right customers.
Are there any other opportunities that a rebrand presents?
Well, a rebrand can also be a catalyst for innovation and growth. It can inspire companies to rethink their products, their services, even their business models.
So it's not just about changing how the company looks. It's about changing how it operates.
Exactly. It can be a springboard for launching new initiatives, expanding into new markets, or even reinventing the company altogether.
That's exciting.
It is. A rebrand can be such a powerful tool for transformation, not just superficially, but at a company's very core.
This has been such an insightful conversation. We've covered a lot, from brand purpose and employee engagement to launching a rebrand and capitalizing on those opportunities that it presents.
It's been a pleasure sharing these insights. It's clear that rebranding in 2025 and beyond is so much more than just a new logo.
It's about creating this holistic brand experience that resonates with customers, empowers employees, and drives that meaningful change.
Absolutely. And it's about embracing the future with boldness, creativity, and a commitment to authenticity.
Welcome back to HR Game Changers. In this final part of our deep dive, we're going to kind of shift gears a little bit and look at some real-world examples of some successful rebrands. Because, it's always helpful to see how these concepts actually play out in practice.
Oh, I agree. It's one thing to talk about the theory, but seeing how companies are actually putting these ideas into action, that's where it gets really interesting.
Absolutely. So are there any brands that come to mind that have really nailed their rebranding efforts in recent years?
Well, one that comes to mind is, there's this pretty well-known company in the food industry.
Yeah.
They were known primarily for their very traditional product line, but they realized they needed to evolve to appeal to, a younger, more digitally savvy audience.
Yeah, they had to find a way to bridge the gap between their legacy and their future.
They did. They embarked on this really comprehensive rebrand that included a refreshed visual identity, a new website and mobile app, and they completely overhauled their marketing messaging.
So what was particularly effective about their approach?
Well, one thing they did really well was they incorporated sustainability and social responsibility into their brand narrative. They partnered with ethical suppliers, implemented eco-friendly practices, and launched initiatives to support local communities.
So they weren't just talking the talk, they were walking the walk.
Precisely. And it resonated with their target audience. They saw a big increase in brand loyalty, social media engagement, and even sales.
That's a great example of a rebrand that goes beyond just aesthetics and actually drives those business results.
It is. And it really highlights the importance of aligning your brand with your customers' values.
Are there any other examples that stand out?
Another great example is this tech company. They were facing some pretty intense competition from these newer, more agile startups. And they knew they needed to shake things up a little bit to stay relevant.
Sounds like they were at a crossroads. What do they do?
Well, they chose to rebrand with a focus on innovation and customer centricity. So they completely redesigned their product interface,
Yeah.
make it much more intuitive and user-friendly.
So they really honed in on enhancing that customer experience.
They did. And they also launched a number of initiatives to actively gather customer feedback and actually incorporate that feedback into their product development process.
Huh? It sounds like they really embraced that agility concept that we talked about earlier.
They did. And, they became much more responsive to customer needs and preferences. And it showed in their results. They saw a significant increase in customer satisfaction. And that led to increased revenue and market share.
These are fantastic examples. It's inspiring to see how companies are using rebranding, not only to adapt to change, but to actually thrive in the face of it.
It really is. And it really underscores the fact that there's no one-size-fits-all approach to rebranding. It's about finding the right strategy for your specific company, your industry, and your goals.
There's no magic formula. It's about finding what works best for you.
Exactly. And it's about being willing to experiment, learn, and adapt along the way.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what key takeaways would you like to leave our listeners with?
Well, I think the biggest takeaway is that rebranding is not simply about changing a logo or a tagline. It's really a complete transformation that touches every single aspect of your organization.
It's about aligning your brand with your values, your mission,
Awesome.
and the needs of your customers.
Absolutely. And remember, it's an ongoing journey, not a destination. The world is constantly changing, and your brand needs to evolve along with it.
So stay agile, stay authentic, and always listen to your customers.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Rebranding can be challenging, but it is incredibly rewarding. And by embracing those principles that we've discussed, companies can create brands that are not only relevant today, but are well-positioned for success in the years to come.
This has been such an insightful exploration of the future of rebranding. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us and helping us understand this complex and evolving topic.
Oh, the pleasure was all mine. I hope this deep dive has given our listeners some inspiration and some ideas to consider as they approach their own rebranding journeys.
That's all the time we have for today, but we encourage you to continue exploring these topics and think about how you can apply these insights to your own organizations. Until next time, thanks for listening to HR Game Changers.